tonight. Okay, so welcome again, everybody, to the ECE webinar series. This is our quarterly event. We do it 3 times a quarter, generally. Sometimes we take a month off in the summer, just because less people usually attend in those months, so it makes it easier. But typically, we have one of these every month. We will be having 2 in April for Week of the Young Child, so more information will be coming out to you about those very soon. And then we will have one in May and June. So keep your eyes open for those emails to come from our team. And let's jump in. Whoops, my computer just likes to flip right ahead. And I just got your PowerPoint, Jamie, so we're good to go. So I want to do a shameless plug here, and this one's super important this time. I have to do it because not only do we have amazing early childhood education online degrees at Rasmussen, it is national, so we have campuses in 6 states, but we operate fully online. But we have a really special thing this time. Starting with our new starts in April, we have reduced our tuition for children, listen to me, for students in the certificate, the diploma, and the associate's degree program starting in April. So for those that are starting with us in April, there is a reduced tuition. You can get your associate's degree for just under $15,000, but that doesn't include all of the things that you can get even more taken off for. So such things as your CDA credential, if you have a current CDA, or if you have the desire to take some what we call self-directed assessments, kind of like a prior learning assessment for our general education courses. And we've got tons of ways for you to show us what you know when you know it, and do it at less cost and hopefully less time to graduation. So I just want to make sure that you see this because I think it's really important. If it's not you that might need to go back to school to be qualified, it might be someone you know. It might be a coworker, it might be a sibling, it might be a friend or a neighbor. And I think it's really important right now. Rasmussen recognized the need in the field right now is so great to have qualified educators, period, in the classrooms, so we can have more and more families going back to work and bringing their children to high quality early childhood programs. But we can't do that if they're not qualified. So we really need to make sure, and cost is a barrier. We know that in early childhood. So we want to make sure that we can do it at the best cost that we feel comfortable doing it so that our quality of program for you is not depleted. That's really important to us too. We want you to graduate with a degree that means something to you, that you can use in the field, that's really going to keep you inspired and motivated to be the best early childhood educator you can possibly be. So I encourage you to take a peek at our website. That's where you're going to find all of the information. You can reach out for more information there, or you can come to one of our information sessions that we do 1 time per month. Our next one's actually next Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central Time. I know it's late for those of you on the East Coast, but we want to try to avoid clashing with putting those kiddos to bed. So we're doing it a little bit late. It's about half hour long or so you can come, ask your questions, get info, and keep going. Asher, it does not transfer to current students, but you'll want to talk to your academic advisor because you want to make sure that you are taking, I guess, the biggest advantage of all the options that are there for you. So talk with your advisor, and they'll be able to coach you through it and give you all the information to make sure that you're making the most of all of the options for you. We don't want you to miss anything. Okay, navigating the WebEx room. We are in a WebEx classroom. You're probably used to this by now, but those of you that are new, you can switch audio from your phone to your computer and vice versa if you need to during the session. You can also go out and come back in. We've had that happen. Sometimes the computer just needs a reboot, a kick in the computer, we call it, to get back started again, and that's okay. You are not locked out of the WebEx room. You can go out and come back in. But do know that you will want to make sure that you are with us the majority of the time so that you get that credit for being here and being able to get that certificate at the end of the session. If you have any questions, comments, Jamie asks you questions and you want to give answers, you just have a thought in the middle of the conversation, you can go ahead and put it in the send to, or put it in the chat box at the bottom right of your screen. Indicate send to as everyone, all participants, whichever one works best for you. And then that way you can have all of your voices heard. And you can read each other's comments and see if, who else is thinking the same as you, who else needs the same amount of help as you, who you can support and encourage at the same time. Talking a mile a minute here. So 2 in-service hours will be awarded. So this is really important. You will have a chance to get this certificate by email within 48 business hours of this session. So we will email it to you as a link. So there'll be a link in the email, not an attachment, that you can then download or save your certificate. Do know that it might sometimes go to your spam or your junk folder, and it depends on the email system you serve or you use. And you'll want to make sure that you check there first if you don't receive it within 48 business hours. So typically by the end of the night on Monday, you should have received the certificate. If you don't, and you checked all those other avenues, you will want to give me an email, and I can go ahead and check into that for you. Do know that it will go to the email address you used to register. So maybe it was an old email if you registered a while back. Maybe it was a work email instead of a personal one. Those kinds of things happen. Will they load up to Develop credits as well? They will. I don't have it set up in Develop to do that. So you would need to submit that document on your own, I believe, is how it works. Oh, that's nice, Jeannie. It was really nice. All right, so let's jump in here because I know she's got a lot of great stuff to share with you, so I don't want to waste any more time with all of my dribble. So I want to introduce to you Jamie Waldvogel, who is the owner of Behavior Best, which is a local company here in the Twin Cities. And I remember talking to Jamie before this company really got off its ground. It was brand new, and we talked for hours, and it was a wonderful conversation, realizing really how in tune she is with early childhood educators, and her company has grown by leaps and bounds since then. So I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Jamie. I'm going to upload that PowerPoint that I realized I was babbling too long to upload it. So I will do that here. As if you want to go ahead and say hello to everyone, Jamie, I will give you the ball as soon as I upload your PowerPoint. Do you have, there you go. Yep, I hear you.
Oh, good, you can hear me. Okay, perfect, I can do it. And so I am so excited to share this with you tonight. And I want to just give a quick disclaimer that most of our courses are approved for 2 hours, but I just can't help myself but to catch all of Rasmussen's events that I can be part of. So I'm going to send Mary the full recording of this course after, because we're going to get through the parts I can tonight to give you the most tonight. But at the end, we have all these great learning activities. And in this specific course, reflection on our own behavior and how we can take this to our jobs tomorrow is very important, especially given the world we're living in now in a pandemic. And so tonight's course was really written from the request of so many leaders in early childhood as soon as the pandemic started. And so we really want to support teachers with the things that can keep you well on your job so that you can serve others. And so tonight's course outline is going to be a little different, and it's because I'm shortening things up, but you'll get the full video at another time. And a little bit about Behavior Best, Mary mentioned, you can go to our website and find out because I want to get right to the content today. The learning objectives are in the PowerPoint slides, and so I'm going to let you see those and move right on to the first part of the content. And so,
okay, can you see it? Can you see the first page of the PowerPoint?
I can, yep.
Okay, then I'm going to give you the ball. I want to make sure that you have full range of being able to manipulate the slides. Because I think that is change role 2, presenter. All right. You should have access to the slides and to be able to manipulate them at the top of your screen.
At the top, it's all still
is it still gray?
Not highlighted, yeah.
there should be, now they can't see. Oh, are you looking at the screen too, Jamie? There you go.
Oh, now it says I'm the presenter. Yep, now I gotcha.
Now we got it. Okay, do you see it? Okay.
Yep, I'm
perfect.
good now. Thank you. So I kind of cruised through all these first couple slides. Mary will send you the PDF with all this, and so I really want to kind of get right to it. And so can you all see the brain picture here on my screen?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So at Behavior Best, we have a unique understanding of child development and human behavioral development. In fact, I'm a board-certified behavior analyst, and you might have heard of behavior analysts sort of serving children mostly with disabilities, which is amazing work that we do. And my team and I still do serve families with children with disabilities. We do also have a strong background in serving adults with head injury. I served men mostly 18 to 22 years old in motorcycle and car accidents. And so we were helping them sort of address the brain that was damaged. And so that part of the brain, that frontal lobe, is where all of our reasoning, problem solving, coping strategies, behavior regulation. And so it's also the last part of our brains to develop. And so when we as humans reach the limits of our skills, our frontal lobes protectively shut down. And so those of us that are maybe 18 to 24 years or older, we have fully developed frontal lobes, but they can always be making new connections, new coping strategies. And the problem is we all reach our limits of our skills. And so then our brains have these protective mechanisms to shut down to keep us safe. So the switch off is something we talk about, the light switch. The switch is on or it's off. And we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit, but the idea being that we all have a switch, and our switches will go off when we reach the limits of our skills. Doesn't matter how old we are, ability, disability, it happens. So I want you to think about when your switch is off, what we mean, if you think about a child, it's that this is not the time to teach them. They are showing unwanted behavior. It could be tantrums, it could be yelling, it could be just laying on the floor refusing to do anything. It could be completely ignoring you. It could be running away from you. Any unwanted behavior. I want you to think about, if I were teaching math facts right now, or colors, or counting, or whatever it might be, and this child was throwing a tantrum right now, would I be teaching academics? Probably not. So if it's not a moment where you would actually jump right into like, okay, friends, today we're going to talk about the letter D. If everybody in the room is throwing a tantrum, nobody's learning about the letter D. Or if any one child in the room is showing unwanted behavior, the likelihood of them learning the content you're trying to teach is pretty minimal. So what we want everyone to understand is when the switch is off is not a teaching moment. It doesn't matter if they're laughing at you and running away. Emotions, we got to take those emotions out of it, the affect, and just look objectively and say, is this a behavior I want to see this child do again? And if not, it means the switch is off and we shouldn't be trying to teach. Instead, we focus on let's de-escalate, let's get their switch back on so that they can then learn. The brain can only receive new information when it isn't under stress. So if the child's light switch is off, they are not learning new skills. So what we talk about tonight, though, is how does this all relate to you as the provider, as the expert, as the adult? When our switch goes off, it can look different for every one of us. It could be moment to moment very different for all of us. But what this means is when our switch as the adult goes off, we are not going to be an effective teacher. And so what we need to do is recognize, first step tonight, what turns your switch off? I have a whole list of them here because we've been in classrooms. We consult in programs just like where you may be working, helping teachers apply these concepts to real life situations with real children. So for a lot of our content has come over the past 10 years of working collaboratively with other professionals like yourselves so that we can, like Mary said, really truly understand early childhood and collaborate to put all of our areas of expertise together. So go ahead, tell me in the chat, guys, what is it for you? What turns your light switch off at work specifically or with children when you're serving children? For me, it can be noise. It could be that all of a sudden you've got an unexpected change. And you know what? That is pretty much a daily thing in a pandemic. There it is, Whitney. You know what I'm talking about, right? Changes in plans. Yes, Arlene, a coworker whose switch may be off. That is a huge one. Again, especially in a pandemic. Chaos, disorganization, when we're not having a plan, right? We get off track. Running a whole class, running in the classroom. That's very different, Asher. Thank you for sharing. So there's some here, but everybody may have a very different thing. Is there somebody that has something that wouldn't be on here? I see being overscheduled. That is key, where there's just not enough time, right, to do all the things you're expected to do. And as COVID-19 added so many extra layers of cleaning and safety and distance and all those things, that was on top of your job where you are already often spread too thin. Crawling all over the floor, yes, it's tough, right, to manage these. And so I want you to think about, when was the last time you had a little drink of water? When was the last time you had some food? Because sometimes that's what flipped our switch off, but we don't know that until now it's noisy in the classroom. Or now somebody tells you, oops, sorry, somebody called in sick, we're understaffed, you're spread too thin today. So we first have to acknowledge when our light switch is off. Here's some things that we have learned as we've walked into classrooms all over trying to help teachers learn some new toolbox methods to work on behavior with kids. So if we walk into a classroom and a teacher is completely avoiding eye contact, very busy on another side of the room, they move away from us, you know, if you see somebody else speak to them, they don't really answer back. They might be only finding what's going wrong in the classroom, commenting on all the unwanted behavior, which at Behavior Best is not something we teach. We don't want to put a big spotlight on the unwanted behavior, but we also don't ignore unwanted behavior, and that's very, very different. Incidentally, there is a free whole workshop on this light switch concept on our website for early childhood providers. And so feel free to go download that. It's kind of a nice foundation for this course, but both of them speak to each other because one of them is about the child's light switch and one of them is about yours. And so any of these that anybody would be willing to confess, because you know what? If we're all honest, right, nobody's going to judge. We're all going to know that we have to be honest with our own well-being in order to be well and serve others. If we're not willing to admit that we're not well, it's going to be really, really hard to be well. Coworkers interrupting while busy with the kids, so it's distracting the classroom. Yep, that's one. Anybody else? Tell me what you have noticed in your behavior that all of a sudden you're like, oh, my light switch might be off. Any of these resonate with you that are on the screen? A coworker might leave the room. That might flip my switch off too. Oh, yes, thank you for sharing. One friend says, I just stopped communicating. That's the freeze, right? The fight, flight, freeze. When we shut down, that's the freeze. What we know about the brain is that if we can catch the light switch dimming or turning off and intervene there, whether it's an adult or a child, we can prevent then the escalation to fight, flight, freeze. If you think about the brain, the light switch, as we've coined it at Behavior Best, is sort of our first layer of defense in our brains to protect us. But then after that, if we miss that part or inadvertently escalate the situation, now we're in fight, flight, freeze. And once we're in fight, flight, freeze, it's hard to get children out of that. And it can be very different than maybe what you have been taught or done, in your parenting or the way you were raised. And so somebody's saying, I get agitated, I get anxious, I get louder. That's a really important thing. There's more negative comments or thoughts. You might experience negativity from coworkers. And then knowing that others are negative, how in the heck can we be positive, right? Nobody can continue to be just happy, rainbows and butterflies when someone else is sort of their switch is off and they're not aware of it and maybe they're not addressing it either. So part of what I'm hoping you'll take from today and share with your colleagues and coworkers is this concept of the light switch, so that by the end of the course today, or the part that we do get through, you'll be able to really help understand what can I do to support my co-teacher and what can they do to support me, so that we can both stay well to serve children. So the first thing is we got to get our light switch back on. Now we're aware it's there, let's get it back on. The first thing I need you to do is stop talking. It is the hardest thing to do. But a lot of times we start talking louder, faster. We all of a sudden start finding everything that's going wrong in the classroom and pointing it out. How many times did I tell you not to do that? That is not okay in my classroom. You know, those kinds of things. And that's not generally how we might interact with children when our switch is on. So the next one, it sounds so cliche, right? Take some deep breaths. But there's a very specific way of breathing deeply that you can do to quickly get your brain to be tricked into thinking your light switch is coming back on. So I'm going to turn on my video for a moment, and I'm telling you, friends, I have terrible lighting. I am in a hotel room. You're going to see some fun in the background. We are at Legoland in Florida, but I want to do this video together, or this task together. So let's see, can we get my video up, Mary, as the one everybody can see? And everybody else, turn yours off, please. So what you want to do is you want to have yourself nice and loosey-goosey, and I want everybody to do this with me, because everybody says they know how to take deep breaths, but I don't see it in the way that I want you to do it. And so for me, it's a really small little video, but I think you guys can all see me a little bit bigger. And so I'm going to do 2 breaths the way that I want you to do it, and then I'm going to coach you through it. So the first one is you're going to take a deep breath in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, and breathe out for 6 seconds. All the way out. And you want to feel your abdomen pull in. So you're breathing out of your diaphragm, your belly, not your chest. And then you're going to feel your belly push all the way out when that breath comes all the way out. It says you can't see me, but my little camera's there. So it might be that I just have to coach you guys, because from my end it shows it.
Yeah, it should show. It should show in the upper right-hand corner. And then I think if you click on, if you hover over Jamie's face in the video, you'll see a little set of arrows in the right corner that will take it from a little screen to a full screen. So you see her face then really big on the screen. So it might help out a little bit.
Sorry about that. No.
Yeah. And then you can go back to seeing the PowerPoint presentation too.
Perfect. Okay, so on the count of 4, we're going to do this together, and then I'm going to 2 breaths, and then I'm going to coach you all to do 2 more of these, okay? So I'm going to take my breath in, hold it, and breathe it out. As you take your breath in, you'll feel your tummy pop up. Hold it. Breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it, 1, 2, 3, 4, and let it go. All the way out, push it out. Hear your breath out. All the way to the count of 6. Is there anybody that doesn't feel their heart rate slowing or their body calming? Thank you for sharing that we've had some people that have found this in their lives already to be super helpful. The reason we're talking about this breathing exercise is because you know what? We can do it anywhere, and it takes just less than a minute. So there's somebody that's saying now they can see me, and so I'm going to do it just one more time. And again, you want to kind of be sitting nice and, you know, loosey-goosey. Your shoulders are calm. My hands are just kind of laying on my lap. You don't have to be like, you know, Zen style, but just, you can be walking around the room doing this and pretending to put a smile on your face as you're breathing. Okay, so we're going to do it one more time. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, and push it all the way out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Anybody not feel the effects of that? That's what I want to see, because it really, really is an important way that we can all use, whether you're interacting with a parent you serve, a child, a coworker, your friend, your family member, your neighbor. This is something, I use this breathing technique before I go into stressful situations, but you can also use it reactively when you're already needing some help to slow your brain down. When I talk about proactively, if you know that the transition to outside with the children is really, really difficult and flips your switch off, let's do some of those deep breaths before you start getting the kids ready to go outside. Let's start doing those breaths, you know, before you notice a problem. So my rule, if I'm in a classroom, is just to say, you know what, if more than an hour has gone by and I haven't taken some deep breaths, I probably should. So the rest of the things on here, I think you all can read. These are things that we can all do. But if you all just need a little break, you know, turn the lights down, decrease some sensory input, provide other sensory input to the children. A quiet audiobook, whispering matter. The children who aren't whispering are going to be wondering, what are they saying over there? Why is she whispering to that other student? Think of one thing that's going well. I was just serving a parent last week, and I said, right now you need to stop talking, because all you're doing is pointing out every single thing your child is doing wrong, and that is not helpful. You're flipping the switch off further and escalating the situation. So what I need you to do is look for something that's going well. And the parent literally said, I do not see anything going well. It feels like nothing's going well. And so that can be the case, and we understand that. But there is always something you can find. You can find a child who is well on task and beeline over to them and give them what we call a little dose of your attention. That could just be commenting on what they're doing. It could be a little like jostle of the hair. It could be a little wink. It could be that maybe you pause and hang out there for 30 seconds and play a little bit with them during their free time or their stations or their centers. But generally, we have to look for ways we can decrease our expectations in that moment. Maybe we're not going to get through the whole 20-minute circle time today, but I'd rather have you end it on success, get everybody's switch on, than try to just power through it, right? And so, you know, the idea that if you first recognize your switches going off, that allows you then to have some at-the-ready tools to get your switch back on. So if you do have a coworker and you have a great rapport, or even if you don't have a great rapport, this may be something that can help you build that rapport and or support your coworker, in that you will be able to say, you know what, my switch is off, or it's dimming, and I am going to need a little help over here. Can we switch spots for a minute? Can we tag team this? And so you can also create some sort of a little silent cue between you and your co-teacher. You know, it might be just a quick like, you know, hey, I need some help, or a little bit of like, you know, or maybe you're just thinking, You look at your teacher with a smile and a, you know, hand on your chin, and maybe that's what it is. You don't want it to be anything that would be too, you know, cueing to the children that this is something, you know, stressful or negative. And so we know that getting our switch back on is really, really hard. Same thing with children, right? It's really hard once it's already off to get that switch back on. So the best thing we can do is prevent the forest fires, right? We want to keep our switches on so that we don't have to be able to work harder to get them on. So again, this varies from teacher to teacher, person to person. It can vary moment to moment, day to day. Think about a proactive intention to keep your switch on. Maybe there's personal stressors. Maybe you were late getting out the door. Maybe something unexpected happened on your way to work. Maybe you didn't sleep well last night. Maybe you didn't get a chance to eat your breakfast, because that happens sometimes, especially if you're a parent yourself. So thinking about what is it in your day that had nothing to do with your classroom that may have flipped your switch off, because that also allows us to have some compassion and not take it personally, like, oh, this child's just pushing my buttons. It's like, no, that's not their intention, I promise. Even when it might look like it, as the behavior expert, I promise you, children are not plotting all day, how can I push Miss Jamie's buttons? Not what's happening. It feels like that, but that's because we all have a developed frontal lobe. We have coping strategies that they don't have. So what child skills can we teach in the classroom to prevent some of that from stressing us out as the teachers? When we talk about skills as the behavior experts, we're talking about things like transitioning calmly between activities, listening the first time somebody says something, accepting no for an answer when my friend says, no, I'm playing with this toy right now, you can't have it. So there's these stressors for our children in the classrooms, but what we know is each of those stressors translates into a specific skill, a social emotional behavioral regulation skill that we can teach children. Way beyond the scope of this class, obviously, but lots of resources out there that we have. We literally have a class on each of the skills. We broke them down into the tiniest, most digestible steps for teachers and parents to understand this content. If your light switch, is going off a lot, one way is to consider what are we doing as far as classroom management strategies so that our things do run a little more smoothly, or maybe we have to make things a little more clear for the children of what the expectations are, or maybe we need to, rearrange the room a little bit. Maybe it's time to rotate out some toys in a different way than we've done. So for example, if the centers or stations time might be a really difficult time in your classroom, I see teachers doing such a fantastic job of rotating what's in and out of those stations for learning purposes and for curricula. But the other thing that we need to do is consider not giving them the entire bucket of Hot Wheels, all the Duplos. Instead, why don't we just fill it up halfway? And then throughout these centers or stations, we're going to go and drop by some more in this dose of attention that I talk about. So instead of, waiting till there's a problem, let's go add more toys to what they're doing to keep them going. Maybe they're playing with Duplos and you bring over some little characters of some sort. And you're like, oh, I think, Chase from Paw Patrol wants to go to sleep in your house that you built. And then you'll walk away and now they've got a whole nother thing to run with their creative imagination to keep playing and stay on task as much as they possibly can, because that's going to help you. When kids are on task, giving short doses of attention. You can walk by a whole center and catch all those kids at that station or center all in one full swoop with a dose of attention. Further classes that we have talk about how the doses of attention are very strategic, based on the skills we want to teach children. So sometimes an example would be, if I want to teach children how to correctly get a toy from a friend instead of taking it from them and grabbing, and then we get biting and hitting and pushing and all these things, we teach children to walk over, if you can see in my camera, with my palm up to the ceiling, because that teaches the listener, I'm ready to receive what you have. Can I have that, please? If we're doing this, it's so threatening to the listener. Somebody's coming at you, right? You get on the defense right away. And that defense is immediately switch off. So then we have this back and forth, and the children are upset. And so when we want to teach that skill, we might swoop into a station's time, and we've got some of the things in our hand that the children want, like a new Paw Patrol guy, for example. And so we walk over and we say, what do we do when somebody has something that we want? So kind of let them know the context of it, but just telling them the instruction isn't enough. They have to practice it. And so then we might say, all you have to do is hold your hand out like this, and then I'll just put it right in there. And so then children start doing this, and great asking, yes, you can have it. Sure, here you go. And before you know it, we walk away, and they're doing that nicely with each other. They're holding their hands out. Their friends are nicely putting it in. When we model it, we're usually like, yes, you can have it. Thank you for asking. Because then they model that back with their friends. It's amazing. We leave the classroom and teachers are like, the whole day, all they did was be like, of course you can have have it. Where before they were like, no, mine. I'll never forget a little guy. He was 2, and he would walk around just biting kids all day until they found us. And so we came in and did our assessment and helped them turn this around. But he just didn't know how to get toys from his friends. So he would bite them, they would drop the toy and go running, and he'd get the toy. I mean, he just figured out that that was the most efficient way to get the toy. So then basically we were able to teach him to walk up and just say, and he couldn't talk much yet, he was 2, so he'd say, have it, have it, have it. And his teachers were just blown away. Like literally that turned the behavior around because the skill that was missing needed to be replaced. This child doesn't need to know, hey, that's not okay, we don't bite our friends. They're not going to learn from us telling them the rules. They are 2. They need to experience doing it the correct way in order for that behavior to change. The new behavior has to work better for them than the old behavior. And that's why I said, when they ask correctly like that, I'm giving it to them every time in the beginning. But then I start to have them delay a little bit. I'm going to have them wait a little bit. Sure, you can have one, but first I'm going to give your friend over here one. Thanks for waiting. Here's yours. So when I say teach skills, it's a very different approach that we have to teaching skills because it's not just teaching them, we don't hit our friends. Okay, but what do we do with our friends? So if you're in the habit of telling children what not to do all day and wonder why it's not working to reduce behavior, how many of you learn from somebody just telling you all day what not to do? If somebody said, don't call that person today, you're like, okay. But then you're like, well, why did they tell me that? What should I do? So if we're teaching children, we do not want to tell them what not to do. We want to focus on what should they be doing right now. And those are the skills we teach. So we also know as experts, behavior always has a purpose. And I really mentioned earlier that when, we know the purpose, we can fix the behavior. Mary's asking a great question. What about using the no thank you response? Kind of a big soapbox we're going to open up, but generally what I think is confusing to children is that we say no thank you. We're telling them no, but we're thanking them for the behavior. Isn't that confusing to a little child who doesn't have a developed frontal lobe yet and is all learning about yes and no and polite and manners and all the things? So what we do is we teach teachers and adults and parents that we never comment on the behavior itself. We interrupt the behavior, we stop the behavior, we redirect the behavior, but we do not comment on it because children learn in a room full of divided attention, right? You will never be one-on-one with children unless there's a problem. So they learn, oh, I create a problem, I get one-on-one time. And we don't want them to learn that. So the idea that if we're telling them no thank you, we're putting a big spotlight on what not to do. We're talking about it, and all of those words are attention. And so what we want to do is silently interrupt that behavior, bring out other things that are going to go ahead and bring that child to what they should be doing. You don't want to suggest things like, oh, look at this cool thing over here. Let's go play with this. They're going to be like, no, I don't want to do that because they already know what they want to do, and that's what caused this problem, right? So I try not to do those things, and in fact, we really want to make sure we're understanding we're telling them no. And I just finished saying we don't want to tell them no because then they don't know what to do. The only time we tell children no is when they ask us for something we can't give them. But if they're doing something wrong and we tell them no, don't stop, we're not teaching anything. And I bet in about 2 minutes it's going to happen again. And the more that that pattern happens, the more the child learns, ooh, this is a really great way to get Miss Jamie's attention. I command one-on-one attention, right? Somebody's asking about redirection. Is that a question like what is redirection, or are you asking is redirection recommended? As long as it's silent. So if you're redirecting by bringing a book over and starting to look at a book and the child comes to you, that's redirecting them. Correct, yes, Asher, thank you. So redirection is recommended. It looks like distraction on the surface of things, but really what you're doing is teaching a child when something isn't going my way, I go find what is available. And so if you've told them to do something and they're refusing, that's a whole different story. But if they're doing something they're not supposed to, like I just finished with a client, the child was like laying on the dining room table, and the parent walks over and says, you know you're not supposed to be on the dining room table. This is a 5-year-old. Of course she does. Let's not lecture and give a whole spotlight on this, because then it's just going to keep getting worse. Instead, what I told him to do was silently walk over, extend his hand out so the child will, like, you know, like this, like take my hand. And if she didn't, then we would pause and do something fun as we're walking away. So we don't want to like teach children, oh, well, just, you know, go ahead and misbehave and I'll give you all this fun attention. But instead, we want to teach them to direct their activity to what they should be doing. So instead of don't climb on the, you know, table, it's you could come over here and play this. Your choices are to do this. You might just bring a coloring book over and put it on the table and guide the child just to sit down on the chair. So silently is a whole new concept. Of what that means is you just don't talk to that child. You can talk to anybody else around. We don't want you saying a word to that child, and we certainly don't want you talking to that child about their behavior. Do not ask them why are they using that behavior, because guess what? They don't know. Or they, you know, even if they say because I was sad, that's not why the behavior started. It started because they don't have the skills. So I kind of summarized what's on the screen here earlier, but I really want you to understand that there is no other reason children are using unwanted behavior in early childhood except they are missing skills. They're not supposed to have all the social skills yet. They are missing skills. That's it. So again, beyond the scope of this class to talk about all the de-escalation techniques and all the silent teaching that we do, because kids don't learn behavior with words. If they did, they would be perfect instruction followers, and they are not. So for you to think that they may just, you know, stop doing something because you told them to is pretty short-sighted, right? We have to get them practicing and experiencing the right way to do things when their switch is on, which is super important. So this is the fun part. We want to get into some learning activities, and the first one I'm going to read out loud, but each of these activities have the same few questions. So don't anybody answer till I ask you the first question, because then I love to see the chat just blow up with all the correct answers, because I know you're going to get them all right. So learning activity 1, it is time to clean up and get ready to transition outside. The teacher has already given the group instruction to clean up. A few children across the classroom continue to play. The teacher repeats the instruction a little louder this time from across the room, but the children continue to play. After about 3 minutes of continued instruction to clean up, the teacher walks across the room and says, I have told you 6 times to clean up. Why aren't you cleaning up? Is that teacher's switch on or off? Quick on the draw. Way to go, guys. Yes. So if the teacher's switch is off, what are some strategies to get the switch back on that I've taught you tonight? Totally off. Yes, I like that, Lorraine. Thank you. Breathing. Yep. And while she's walking over to lecture them, why not take some breaths along the way? Always walk over silently. Do not say anything as you're walking towards them. When you walk over and you get near them and you're not talking, they literally will look up at you like, why is she not talking? Or why is he not talking? Because they're so used to adults like coming up trying to fix the problem with words. What happened? You know, that's not okay. You know, can I help you? Are you safe? All those things, right? So you can do all the same things, but just stop talking, because that minimizes how much attention you're giving to the unwanted behavior. We don't want that. We teach really, really difficult things when they get only your attention for all the wrong things, right? What are some strategies next time to prevent the teacher's switch from going off? How do we keep that switch on once it's back on, or how do we prevent this for next time? Kayla says expectations. Can you tell me what you mean by that a little bit more? Clean up in 5 minutes. Oh, stay hydrated. You got it. Works for you. I like that, Magda. Thank you for sharing. Take a step back, breathe before starting that transition. Turn the lights down. Great. Yes, all of it. So I want to go a little further, and this is where, you know, again, beyond the scope of the class a little bit, but for these 3 children off in the corner that are not cleaning up, what you're going to do, this is, again, part of our silent de-escalation, but also confirm their switches on before we repeat it 6 times. So Jennifer just said it, engage and help them. People will say all the time, but we don't want to do it for them. We're teaching them to clean up. And it's like, but they're not cleaning up. So we got to start somewhere, right? We got to start small. And so you might have to help them a little bit and get them going and then back off. So what we might recommend is the teacher approaches after the first time he or she says the instruction, doesn't say a word as the children are still playing. Starts to put things away that not the things the children are like, you know, playing with. We're not taking things out of their hands, but anything nearby, putting 1 or 2 things away, and then holding their hand out to see if that child will hand you the toy that they have. That's a silent check to see, is their switch on? Making eye contact is a silent check to see, is their switch on? Another silent check that we could do would be to try to hand them a toy or push the bin or bucket closer to them to see. If none of those silent cues are working, the last thing we want to do is say, okay, it's time to clean up now, because their switch is not on. If they didn't receive your silent interactions, the likelihood that they're going to follow an instruction is pretty minimal. And the more time you give an instruction and they don't do it, you're just teaching them it's okay to ignore you. You're teaching them it's an okay, expected thing in this classroom for me to just ignore and keep playing until they come over and help me, or till they come over and are now making me clean up, like, oh, they're here, we better start cleaning up. So your job is to help them from the front end next time. And I love how you guys are all, you know, warnings, you know, 5-minute warning, but you all do that really well anyway. And the majority of time, that isn't working for these couple of kids. Working for the rest of the whole classroom, right? That predictability, that structure. But again, it's these few kids where your tools are not working that we want to provide you new resources. And so in that situation, what I'm recommending is a few silent checks to confirm the switch is on before you actually say, time to clean up now. So in the future, before you give the instruction to transition, you kind of scoot on over and get involved with them first. Instead of saying 1 minute left, kids don't understand the minutes, guys. It's an abstract skill. They don't even learn time telling until like what, 1st grade, 2nd grade maybe? So instead, I want you to use concrete, clear choices. So what it would be something is like, your choices are to, you know, do 1 more thing with the Hot Wheels or 2 more things. Oftentimes, when we give that choice, now we're giving them this sort of perceived sense of control. That choice cannot come after they're refusing. It has to be proactive. Otherwise, they'll learn, oh, I just refuse, and they'll sweeten the deal for me and make it easier and give me a choice. So if you already know these couple of children across the classroom are not going to clean up, you're going to assume that every day, right? And that way you're ahead of it, and you've got a plan to get on top of it. So then you're going to be near them when you give that instruction to start cleaning up. You're going to give them choices that are concrete examples. Your choice is to, you know, take 1 more lap around that bookshelf with the truck or 2. Your choice is to take 1 more lap or put it away right now. Your choice is to stack 3 more blocks or 2 more blocks. Your choice is to put all the blocks in the bin or just 1 today. So if you have a child that never cleans up, let's just start small. Get them to do just 1 thing. Tomorrow, maybe 2. Before you know it, the child's just cleaning up. But the more you put your attention on to them not cleaning up, how many times have I had to tell you? Oh my goodness, you guys, when I'm in like Target or shopping or wherever and I hear a parent saying, how many more times have I have to tell you? I'm like, well, many more if you keep handling it this way. Like repeatedly telling them over and over clearly isn't working. So ask yourself that. How many more times am I going to have to say this before I change how I'm addressing the behavior? The child's like, you can keep saying it 20 more times because I'm still over here living my best life, right? So moving on to the next one. Does anybody have any other questions? I know some of the actual like preventative strategies of teaching is going to be a little bit beyond the scope of this class, but I just want you to kind of understand the parts about switch on, switch off. If we just reflect on that throughout our day, how do we get our switch back on? And how do we keep it on once it's already on? How to handle students with aggressive behavior. Same thing. There's nothing different because it's aggression. We interrupt the behavior. That's why we say do not ignore. You know how many times I've walked in a classroom and they're like, yep, the child's doing this for attention, so we're just ignoring it. And they've got all the children huddled over into one corner. The child's like just destroying the classroom. I have bookshelves tipped over, books everywhere, toys strewn about, things ripped off the wall. Like, we do not ignore behavior. We're teachers. If a child wasn't learning a reading, phonics thing, would we ignore that and just move on? So I want you to think about behavior as any other skill you're teaching, just like ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. Nothing is different. We stop the aggression, we direct to what they should be doing. If they hurt somebody else, you go right to that child that was hurt first. If you're going to go to the child to get their switch back on who was hitting, you're going to silently do so. And again, beyond the scope of this class a bit to know how to address the child behavior, my focus tonight is really what you need to do as the adult to keep your switch on and to support your well-being so you can be the best teacher and help these kiddos keep their switches on. Meg is asking, can we use a calming zone? And we actually just wrote a whole class about strategies to remain calm in the face of classroom chaos. Calming space is not needed. The reason we don't recommend calming spaces is because they're only used reactively when there's a problem to calm down, right? Well, then children just learn, oh, well, I don't want to sit in circle time. Great, I'm going to act them up, and they'll send me off to this nice, wonderful calming zone. So they're not a bad thing, but what I want you to use it as, because it is, you're right, who just said this? Whitney, thank you. It starts to look like a timeout. And you know what? We put a fancy name on it and call it a calming zone so it sounds pretty, but guess what? It's still a timeout because it came after unwanted behavior. And guess what? It's probably reinforcing their behavior. That means I'm going to get out of, delay, escape, avoid that thing I don't want to do. I would much rather go sit in the calming area. So it is like a timeout, and guess what? Whatever state you're in, I don't know, but in Minnesota, I know the licensing does not allow timeouts. If you're going to use a timeout and separate the child from the group, even if it's just in a chair separate, 10 feet away, you have to technically write that up as a separation, that the child was separated from the group and had to be one-on-one with an adult. And guess what? Nobody writes it up because you know how many times I've been in a classroom and I've seen they're breaking licensing all the time because there aren't any strategies that do work. So instead of sending the child to the calming area reactively, what I want you to do instead is recognize at what time of day does that child need that. If they need that always right when circles time starts, then you know what? Have them go in the calming area first. And you know what? You let us know. You let us know when you're ready to come to circle time. If you're continually trying to lure them over, good luck. It's just going to keep giving more attention, one-on-one, in a world of divided attention that's really powerful. Attention is the biggest thing for kids when there's not one-to-one ratios. So if you're going to have a calming space, I think it's fantastic, but let's call it something else. Let's call it a place where we, slow down our bodies. Think about children's words. Children do not know what the word calm means. Children do not understand abstract words until they get like hundreds of examples of them. They don't understand what listening means. And you know why? Because listening, the behavior changes every time. First, I have to listen and stand in line nice and quietly. Now it's time to listen, I have to be quiet while it's circle time. Now it's time to listen and I have to line up at the door. Now I listen, I have to put my plate away after, snack. So the vague, abstract word of listening means nothing to a child until we pair it with a whole lot of very specific ways that they are listening. So try not to say things, friends, like put on your listening ears. That is the most confusing thing to a child. All you're teaching them is this rote thing that says put on your listening ears, but they don't actually know what listening means until you give them all these examples. So same thing with the word calm. They don't know what calm means. How many times have somebody told you to calm down and it actually helped? Doesn't help me a bit. When somebody tells me to calm down, it makes me more frustrated. My switch flips off even harder. So think about that. We have developed frontal lobes, and that doesn't work for us. It doesn't help at all when somebody's trying to get you to calm down. So again, back to the calming spaces, if you can use it in a way that's preventative, that's going to be helpful. Back to the child at circle time. Maybe you have that child sit just for a little bit. We know we can't make it through the full 20 minutes. So instead, I'm going to just start with, the first story. And then I'm going to say, have another teacher come and offer that child a break and say, your choices are to stay here at circle time, or you can go over here and hang out and relax a little bit. Chill. Take a break. So that's very different than a timeout, especially because it's contingent on the behavior you want to see more of. People are probably thinking like, oh my goodness, you're telling me to take them out of the group when it's going well? Why would I ever do that? Well, because you don't want to wait until it's not going well, because that's what the child has already learned. If they're acting a fool, right, during circle time, that probably means they've learned to do that to be excused from that time. So we need to unravel that pattern behavior and get them the break before they show unwanted behavior. And what that does is it teaches them all the stuff that came before that, like sitting nicely, listening to the story gets reinforced with the break, just like all the unwanted behavior used to get reinforced with a break. We're flipping that around. Now you get a break because you're doing well. But then tomorrow, your break's going to come a little later. I've even done this. I was in a classroom with a child who had no English and had never been away from his parents, never slept out of his parents' bed, never ate American food. I mean, all the things. He had come, as an immigrant. And so he didn't know they were supposed to sit in the circle time. He wanted to go play with the cool things, the cars and the stuff on the other side of the room. So we knew he wasn't going to sit for 20 minutes. He didn't understand anything they were teaching. By the way, this child learned English very quick going into this setting, which was really cool. And a bunch of the other children learned his language, which was really cool. But we used some sand timers from like Lakeshore Learning, right? And I sat with him in circle time with the 1-minute timer. He just sat there and watched it. He didn't even listen at all to anything going on because he couldn't understand it anyway. So the 1-minute timer ended. I reached my hand out like this, like take my hand, buddy. He took my hand. We walked to a different part of the classroom. I gave him a 3-minute timer. He got to do with his Hot Wheels or whatever he was playing with for 3 minutes. The timer ends, I take him back to the group time for now 5 minutes, and he did just fine because he knew when that timer ended he was going to get to go back. So we just took little baby steps like that. Where I got him that day was sustainable for the teachers. And he didn't have to hold the hourglass timer. The teacher could just have it right next to her. He would watch it to end. He would get up and excuse himself. He would come back when the timer over there ended because we taught him to just flip it. But before you knew it, maybe even a matter of like a week or less, this child was sitting through the entire circle time. So there's lots of ways that we can help now, keep the switches back on. I know we're at the end of our time, and we had a little bit of a delay getting started with my technology errors. So I see some questions. I also have a few more learning activities. Mary, do you have a preference if we wrap it up or we do one more learning activity or answer some questions?
Keep going. If you can do another learning activity and answer the few questions, I think this is just, I love how you explain everything. So keep going if you're able to. Yeah, another one would be great.
My goal is to serve, and the more people that I can get to, the better. Yep. So I will do the questions after because maybe some of them will be answered in this learning activity too. Okay, so you have 2 children tugging on a toy. One leans over and bites the other child's hand. The teacher says, "No bite," from across the room and quickly runs over to the children. When the teacher is standing next to the children, the teacher turns their attention to the child that was bit and says, "Why did you do that?" Or, I'm sorry, the child that bit. "Why did you do that?" And removes the child from the learning area. Is their switch on or off? You got it. Quick on the draw, Arlene. Yes, off. It sounded like it might have been coming back on because they walked over and gave the attention to the child who bit. That was great. That was a good first step. But then all the attention went to the child who bit and all this conversation about, well, you know we're not supposed to bite. Why did you bite? Well, if you want the honest truth, it's because, you know, I really wanted that toy and that was the only way I was going to win the tug of war. And so I will tell you, I'm actually going to read a text message from my consultant who was in a classroom this morning. And this just, it's like perfect timing for this learning activity. And in fact, I might add this in here when I teach it again, like in the recording. So she says, I just had to share, best line of the day. I got between two kiddos playing tug of war for a turn with a truck. The one boy looks at me and says, he won't share, and sharing is caring. So that does not like melt your heart, right? She was in a 3-year-old classroom. And so then she says, how many times do you think they've been told to share because sharing is caring? So it was a great teaching moment, not only for her, but for the teacher she was there supporting that day. Because they can tell you all day long the right or wrong behavior, but guess what? Doesn't mean it translates into behavior change. Because when the real moment comes, we're not asking them to talk about the behavior at all. We're not asking them to describe to us what was right or wrong about it at all. We actually just want them to do it different. And so that's why instructions aren't an effective way of teaching. So what's a way in this situation? What can the teacher do to get the switch back on when it's clearly off? Always, she was hot on the draw. Arlene was, she typed breathe and she was ready to hit send. You got it. I love it. In this example, what I would do, I would walk over silently. I would say nothing from across the room because it doesn't help anyway. If, you know, sometimes we've heard that teachers have been taught in some program, not Rasmussen by any means, that if you shout from across the room, it startles the children, so then they stop the behavior. Not in a classroom where there's a lot of loud children. That isn't effective. If you're a parent and you're out in a parking lot and you scream, stop, and you know, that might work. It might startle the child enough, right? But not in a noisy, busy classroom. And again, all it does is call attention to the unwanted behavior. So in this situation, we walk over, give our attention to the child who was bit. Get them calm, happy, you know, switch back on, get them engaged in another activity. And as long as that other child is not still biting, you know what? The child got the toy. I will address that in a minute. You don't need to go deal with the child who took the toy, even if he has the toy. What you say to all the children as you approach, you can say one-liners, right? It's not like you have to be perfectly silent, but you can say to the other children in the area, I'm here to help. That's all you have to say. So nobody's going to think that you're not handling the unwanted behavior. We get this all the time, that teachers are worried that if they're not talking, others think they're not addressing the situation. And it's a very different thing when you're ignoring versus not talking, because you're right there supporting the children, you're, you know, helping them, but silently until they show their switches back on. So now I've gotten the child who was bit engaged in activity again, their switch is back on. I'm going to circle back to the other child when I've got a moment. I might not have a moment right now, right? But what I want to do is catch that child when their switch is on. I'm not going to harp about not biting. All we're doing is putting a big spotlight on biting. The child might be hearing, wah, 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 bite, wah, 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 bite. And I bite my friends, wah, 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 bite. That's all they're hearing. Let's stop talking about the unwanted behavior. Kids will tell me all the, you know, parents will tell me all the time, teachers, I'm going to hit you. Well, it's because we taught them the word hit. When we said don't hit, we don't hit our friends. Why are we talking about hitting anything except a ball? You know, like, let's not even teach them to talk about the unwanted behavior, let alone ask them why they did it. So some strategies here. Now this child switches back on. They've got that toy that they were effective in retrieving from the friend that they bit. So now we're going to walk over. We're going to try to do one of these. If you've worked with your children on, you know, can I have it, please? But if that child does not give you the truck, then you might get involved with the truck and say, your choice is to have, or maybe whatever toy, your choice is to have one more turn or two more turns. So you're basically just going to get them to end it on success. And then you're going to make sure that that other child has something that they're enjoying. You don't necessarily have to go back and give that toy, a chance to play with that toy to the other child who it was taken from or who was bit. You could, but it's not necessary. That's not how both parties learn, by going back and, you know, sending them right back into the fire, so to speak, right? So strategies to keep the switch on are going to be, like I described earlier, when children are playing in stations, and you already know there's children, especially if they're 2 years old, 18 months, they might bite. If we kind of just assume they're going to, let's right away start working on, can I have it please? Because that's going to prevent everything that just happened. So the big picture is, we're not going to keep harping on biting, biting, biting. We're going to focus on, why did the biting happen? Oh, because the children were both tugging on a toy. They don't know how to get a toy from one another. Don't tell them share. They don't know what share means. Share is such a vague, abstract word. Until they get lots of examples of actually sharing correctly, it's like wah, 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 wah. They don't understand that in terms of actually behavior change, right? Adults cannot share. Why would a young child? I know, right? It's such a good point, Mary. So if we only focus on how we're going to react to the problem and address the biting, we're going to keep reinforcing the biting. It's going to keep happening. And the idea being, we want to get ahead of it. Okay. So there's other learning activities here. I think there might even be like, oh, there's just 2 more, but you're going to get the slide deck. You can go through it on your own. You're all getting great responses. You're totally catching on. And so I'm going to pause now and look over. I'll leave it on learning activity 3 here. I'm going to peek up at some of these questions and answer some of them. Oh, Kayla, you just made my whole night. She says, I need this class. I'm getting such great advice. I feel like it's hitting my soul. You guys, when I started this company 10 years ago, I knew it was my sole purpose, S-O-U-L, to be on this earth, to help others understand behavior in a 21st century way. We've learned so much about childhood, early development, behavioral development, brain development, that we can do so much better now than even a generation ago. Even 10 years ago, right, Mary? Even 5 years ago, we've learned so much about behavior. And so the things that worked 10 years ago aren't going to work in a world of immediacy, gratification. Children are literally being raised to be impulsive if we don't teach self-control early on. Everything is immediate gratification. Don't just think about iPads, friends. Think about how they see us, you know, show up at Target in the drive-up line and magically our groceries just come out. They don't see all the things we did to make that happen. They just see groceries immediate, right? How many times do you immediately check your notifications when your phone dings? All we're teaching our children is we don't know how to wait for things. We have a debt problem on this hand and on our hands in this country because people buy things when they don't have the money for it yet. So what are we teaching kids early on about self-control versus impulsivity? In self-control, you know, immediate gratification when I was being raised, when I was growing up, was like my feet in the dirt and a sprinkler, you know, outside. And so I just want you to really consider, you know, the idea that there is a different way now. And you know, collaborating with early childhood is the different way, because I can't be the expert of everything. Behavior analysts are not experts of early childhood. We've learned a lot, my company and I, because we've worked with all of you. But we're not the experts. We don't know curricula in and out. We don't spend 8-10 hours a day with children. You know, we come in and out. We're there for maybe an hour at most in a classroom, up to 3 hours in a building at a time. So let's see. Sharing game. Yeah, so this is great, Jennifer. She says, you know, we sit in a circle and have a toy and play with it for a few seconds and then share with our friend and pass it. This is just perfect, because you know what you're also doing? You're catching them when their switches are on in a circle time format, when everybody's listening and engaging and excited for them to have their own turn to share. You have a perfect example of how they're learning what the real word share means. If we go running up after the problem when they took a toy from a friend and bit them or yelled at them or hit them or whatever, that's not the time when they're going to understand what sharing is, because they just did the wrong thing, right? Again, it goes back to, we don't say no biting, we say what to do. And in this moment, describing sharing isn't going to help unless the switch is back on by now, by the time you're having this conversation. And to my friend Jennifer's point, if it's a game and it's done when everybody switches around proactively. So maybe you do this sharing circle time right before you send them into their stations and centers. And then as you're walking around, kind of bopping in between each of the little centers, giving your doses of attention, then what you're going to do is walk over and model for them. Hey, can I have a turn with that? And they give it to you. Thank you for sharing. Oh, my turn's done. I'm ready to share with somebody else now. Who would like a turn? All you have to do is hold your hand out and I'll put something in there, right? So really good examples. And I think I love these forums online, even more so I would argue than in person, because these chat rooms give so many more opportunities for you all to share the things you have created and designed and implemented in your classrooms so that others can get these great examples too. Using the Can I Have It Please with my 16-month-old and 3-year-old at home. Yes, that is so huge. Honestly, as soon as they can start walking or crawling over to their friends, they can start learning this just as quickly as they can learn this. And again, beyond the scope of the class, but you guys are so great and engaged. If they're reaching over as you've got something they want, just intercept their little hand and flip it over. All you do is grab the little wrist and flip it so that the thumb goes to the outside, and then plop it right in that hand. Great job asking, can I have it? Sure you can, here you go. So then you might, stay a little bit, model for them how to get it, and then walk away. And then when you swoop back in next time, after checking on some other groups, then you might say, wow, look at you all. You're using your hands to show your friends you're ready to get a toy. Thank you for asking with your hands. That was a really great way to let your friend know that you want a turn. Let's see. Honestly, I have to use the Can I Have It Please with lots of kids of lots of ages. My oldest nephew is 15, and I'll never forget when he was 12. At Christmas time, he was like grabbing all the toys from all the kids, like, oh, let me see what you got, right? Let me see that. And it was like, oh my goodness, even at 12, he's taken stuff out of people's hands. Like, it just made me think, see, we got to teach this when they're little. He wasn't being malicious or rude, but it's just a natural thing we do. We walk over and we grab things from people. So also be mindful of you going over and taking things when kids aren't doing what they want to, or you want them to do with the toys or materials or activities. You're going to walk over and you're going to hold your hand out first, and you're going to move other things out of the way that you don't want them to mess with. Okay, see some other questions. Yes, Rebecca, the words we choose are super crucial, and the tone that they come with, right? The cadence with which our words are spoken, all children pick up on those things. And I will tell you that, this is just on our Instagram, an escalated child, or sorry, no, an escalated adult cannot de-escalate an escalated child. Like, it just doesn't work. How many times have you tried, when your switch is off, to help calm a child down? Like, it's just like, boom, button heads, right? And doesn't work. And it's not because you're not an amazing teacher. It's because your switch is off. And we're not good teachers when our switch is off. And our learners aren't good learners when their switches are off. It's just, their job is to learn, but our job is to keep their switch on when we're teaching them. If I can count how many times I hear some staff say they don't listen, you wouldn't believe how high the number is. Yes, so maybe you can help them learn some new strategies. Let's see if next one. The thing that switches off my switch is how many times I hear the kids get yelled at in preschool by certain staff, and it's just frustrating. you know, yelling, all that teaches them to do is use your voice to overpower people. And it's not teaching them learning, right? They're not listening any better. And so what advice do you have for children who at cleanup transition time, they just run around or start crawling around it? Yes. So it's not really much different, Kayla, than the example we gave earlier of the kids who just were not cleaning up, period. They were just playing, very, you know, passively playing, like, I'll just see if I can get away with a little bit more. It's interesting because those children often a year or two later we will find are having issues with toilet training, or refusing to poop on the toilet is a big one, unfortunately. Not my most glamorous skill to help with, but it's a skill that when they passively learn to avoid and they're not the squeakiest, you know, wheel in your classroom, it becomes a problem at some point when we can't just allow them, like in this situation, to keep using the behavior that's not working for us as the adults. So again, if you already know that at transition time these children run around and they're crawling around, we have to get ahead of it. More so even than the children who are just chilling out, you know, playing a little extra long. So I think it has to be those situations where we get their attention, we get engaged with them, and we have to guide them through that transition, or we're going to be reacting. So I always say just kind of assume that it's going to happen every day for those couple of kids that you know it sometimes happens for. That way you're kind of ready to implement some of these strategies to keep them successful. So it might be, you know, if they're already running around, you're going to have to not chase after them. I want you to walk in the direction they're going, but not let them know you're coming towards them, for example. So you're not going to make eye contact. You're going to kind of walk in the direction that they're headed, not after them. So if they're headed towards the bookshelf, you're going to go to the bookshelf. You're not going to follow behind them to the bookshelf. You're going to take a different route, basically. And you're not intercepting in a way where they're like, oh, now they're chasing me. I'm going to run the other way, and now I'm going to go this way. It's not a cat and mouse. It's you're going to go nearby them without letting them know that's why you're heading over there. And so it's kind of like a little walk by. And as you get closer, you're gauging, does that make them run further from me? And then if there's more than one of those children, I want you to consider which child is most likely to get their switch back on quickest with your support and go to them first. It's like triage, right? The less that the ringleader has to, you know, entertain, the more likely that ringleader is to also, you know, start following the instruction to clean up. So I think it's really important to really consider the context. If you already know the situations that are difficult, most of the time I'm going to talk to you about how do we get ahead of it. You know, the way you react to it to help get the switch back on is really, really important too, but that's not what's going to change the behavior. Your reaction has the potential to make it worse or better, but it's not going to fix the problem that started it to begin with because they're missing a skill. That's why. We can consequence the heck out of kids all day, but think about if you didn't have a skill and somebody kept giving you consequences, and you're like, but they didn't tell me what to do. They didn't teach me any differently. You start to resent that person giving the consequences out. We don't want children to learn to resent teachers in early childhood. That is not a good look for the rest of their lives, right? You guys have such an important job on your hands in terms of instilling the love of learning so right from the get-go for the rest of their future career, right? All right, let's see. Yeah, and Mary says, you know, they probably tuned out that teacher, and so she just keeps getting louder because they're learning. I might as well just ignore until they actually walk over here and help me, or make me, I guess is the word. All great questions. I hope that you are all catching on to this concept of your own light switch. That really is the focus for tonight. Again, DHS, the folks that develop, lots of our partners that we serve throughout Minnesota have asked for a course on preventing burnout, on, you know, helping. You all are the heroes before this pandemic even came around. And I know the state of Minnesota is providing some extra funding in the surplus that we have to support early childhood because there is such a dire need for your work, for shortages. And so Behavior Best is here to provide amazing continuing education opportunities. We are in develop. We put our courses up there on our website. They're all self-paced at this point. So you can take them whenever you want. You've got the videos and content forever. And so I will take a couple more questions, but I know I've kept you longer. And so the learning activities are here. You can work your way through those. And then there is another full recording, but since we ended up doing this one and we got through most of the slides, I'm not sure if the one that we had pre-recorded is necessary. This one might even be better for you.
Yeah, this one is good. Yeah, this has been fantastic. You really, you know, you're so logical, and so it just makes sense when you hear it and discussed. And I think the light switch concept, when I first learned it years ago from you, Jamie, it was one of those things that there's times where I'll be, you know, frustrated over something that's happening in my personal life, or I'll be losing control. It actually just happened to me earlier this week when I found out something was going to be happening that I had talked to myself and told myself wasn't going to be happening and was happy about, and then something happened. And I was like, oh no, now this is going to be happening, and I was not ready for it. And so I was definitely, I did not have my light switch on. I was losing control. I was upset about everything, and everything that happened, you know, my dog would walk the wrong direction and I'd get mad, you know, it was like everything was setting me off. And I finally, you know, my daughter was trying to talk me through it actually. And I looked at her and I said, my light switch is so not on right now. And she's like, what? And so it was, I totally understand where it's coming from. And these are behaviors that, you know, we can't just automatically, our light switch has to be, you know, has to be on for us to be able to work with the children effectively, but it can't be the only thing. And I think we as educators have to remember that, you know, our work is very vital and there's a lot of pressure. We feel a lot of pressure because of the importance of our work with young kids, but, you know, it takes time and it takes practice, and you're not in this alone. And, you know, other educators feel the same way, and they've been through the same situation. Like these situations that you have on here, you know, all of us have been through multiple times, and we probably handled them all in multiple different ways that we should or shouldn't have, you know. And so it's like we're all in this together. And I think you know, remembering
real
that.
Life. This came from being in real classrooms, you know, the ones that we not only hear all the time when we're doing classes like this, where people are asking, like, what do we do in this situation? You know, so as we've tried to grow, you know, these courses, that's the best part where people really take the learning home, is because we can give you exact scenarios we've worked through already in environments just like yours.
Absolutely. And you know, Lorraine just posted about biting situations are overwhelming. And yeah, I mean, that's the one where you literally, you know, instead of yelling across the room to get a child to bite, you literally need to be like, okay, now's the time I take my deep breaths, you know, and and you're like, as you're walking over there, because, you know, you can envision all of the things in your head, you know, the angry family, you know, the crying child, you know, all the different things going on, and it's just too easy to, you know, to go there. So yeah, this has been extremely helpful. So thank you very, very much. And then,
can I just say one more thing? I see two more things. One is that, you know, when we first started back when, we would get, and we still get requests to this day, do you have a class about biting? And we will never have a class about a specific behavior, because the behavior is just how it's communicated to us. The behavior is the coping strategy for the child. We need to understand, why does this child use this behavior? And that's how we get to it. The why is usually attention, to get out of something I don't want to do, and or I just don't have the skills yet. So again, I really want you to hear the idea that biting is no different than yelling, than throwing things, than laughing at you and running away. I mean, it is. It's serious. It's a very stressful situation. But the way we handle it is not to focus on the biting, right? And then the last thing I wanted to say was, somebody mentioned, you know, parents, and Mary, you did too, how parents attack Lorraine, that's just a perfect way to describe it, right? We have a whole class because of this. We were, you know, finding that the way behavior was being presented to the parents would flip a parent's switch off. And how are you going to get that parent to be a partner in this child's learning and development if their switch is off? And so we have a whole class about strategies to, you know, help parents in the management of their child's behavior, because even if it's not happening at home, which, you know, even though parents say that, it always is. It just looks different at home because they don't have 20 kids there, right? But the idea that the way we present the concerns is going to, you know, rope a parent in to work with us, or it's going to push them right away. And so when I talked to you guys earlier about what are some of the things when I walk into a classroom that I know a parent switch or a teacher switches off, use that same slide, print it off, you know, put it on your, not where everybody would see it, but, you know, consider those same questions about the parents they walk in. How many of you have parents that come in, quickly scoop up their child and all their stuff and out before you even know it? Not because, you know, there's a problem per se, but when then there is a problem, it's really hard to catch them, and maybe they're quickly in and out because another person in the past has talked to them about their child's behavior and they're avoiding. So I want you to look at those same things that we know, you know, we look for in teacher behavior, and consider those when you're thinking about how to approach a parent to get their involvement in their child's behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just put Jamie's website in the chat, so you can take a look there at resources she has, webinars that she has. Your website's pretty awesome, Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pretty awesome. All right.
We took the pandemic to build this curriculum because we had a ton of courses before the pandemic, but being able to just take the time, you know, when we're not serving as much, to, you know, break things down. And we've learned so much in working with all of you over the years, because we can't be there 8 hours a day implementing, but that's also why we have to partner with you all, because I need to get to as many children as possible. And the way that I do that is by partnering with as many experts that serve children as possible. And so thank you all for being ambassadors to getting kids what they need in this 21st century. And this was even before the pandemic. You know, my vision is, let's not wait till behavior is bad enough to need an expert, because that's usually when I get called in. Prior to starting this company, I would only get called when things are going so bad we need to bring in an expert. And that just seems very backwards to me. Let's just assume it's going to get bad for all of them when they leave our early childhood, you know, career, and let's nip all these things first, you know, before they leave. So we're here to help.
Yeah, because you're teaching lifelong skills, and you know that's the key. We're not just trying to stop behavior. We're trying to teach them lifelong skills that they will take with them, you know, forever, and in social situations and work situations and school. I mean, it's great.
Like peer relationships. Think about when they get to like dating situations. If they don't know how to accept no for an answer,
yeah,
we don't want to even think about what that looks like, right?
Yeah.
So you're right. It's start now, because these are not just, you know, skills we teach 10-year-olds. We don't have to teach them if we start young.
I remember I took a training from Mr. Rogers Institute, or the Fred Rogers Institute, years ago, and one of the things he said was, you know, if a child is, you know, acting out towards other children, instead of telling them to stop or no hitting or whatever we're telling them to do, they need to understand what stop truly means, because physically in their body, do they understand what stopping their body physically feels like, and how that feels enough that when they're asked to do it, that they know what to do. Like a child who's running after a ball and it goes out into the streets, and you as the parent yell, "Johnny, stop," and the child turns around and smiles at you and then keeps running towards the ball. It's likely that they didn't know the word stop, but they heard their name, and so they turned around and smiled, "Hey, Mom," you know, and then kept running because they heard their name, versus just realizing how, you know, what it means to actually physically stop their body. So he would even say, you know, when a child, if you're sitting next to a child and a child goes to, you know, hurt someone or something like that, is to help the child physically stop their body so that they can understand how that feels, so that when they're asked to stop, then they know what to do, and teach them then the behavior that you want them to do instead of stopping, so that you're kind of doing both activities. So I don't know if I explained that very well, but yeah, I think this has been a fantastic seminar, so thank you so much.
Thank you all. I enjoyed myself so much.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll come back in the future.
I'm always here. I always love doing your spring events. Let's keep doing it.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for the evening. And so, again, you will receive an email within 48 business hours of this session with a link to a certificate. And I think you had a handout too, right, Jamie, that I think you had sent. I think is it the PowerPoint that you had sent?
Yep, we just put it in a PDF for everybody.
Yep. So that PDF will come to you guys along with the certificate, and definitely check out the website. You'll find some really great stuff there, both for you, your colleagues, and maybe even some of your families as well. So thank you, and have a great evening, everyone, and have an amazing weekend. Oh, and yes, there will be access to the recording for, I think we do it for 90 days. I know Carly was asking me privately, and that will be posted probably by Monday as well on our guide page on our website. And we usually share that along with the email so that you can take a peek back at it if you'd like to, because there's a lot of great conversation tonight, and you might need to refresh your memory when you get back to work on Monday. So thank you guys. Have a great evening. Oh, so cute.